The night felt padded, like the city had been wrapped in wet cloth and told to hush. Rain stitched across the windshield in thin silver lines. The dash clock blinked 12:41. Ellis nursed a burnt coffee, and I could feel the warmth through my gloves as the cup knocked my knee every time we idled at a light. The radio murmured in low code and static, nothing urgent, just a heartbeat to keep us awake. Streetlights made the asphalt look like dark glass. Our rig hummed, steady and familiar, a metal room that always smelled like antiseptic and rubber and the last call. We drifted our usual loop by the river road, windows fogging at the corners. I counted the breaths in my mask, in, out, slow. The city breathed with me. Somewhere far off, a siren climbed and dropped, then left the air empty again. I remember thinking it was a good quiet. The kind that lets your shoulders drop. The kind you don't question. I should have questioned it. Because that quiet didn't end. It opened. And what stepped out of it followed us for the rest of the shift. The first few hours rolled on the way they always did. Quiet roads, flickering streetlights, the low hum of tires against wet pavement. Ellis and I traded small talk about nothing that mattered. Football, bad coffee, the ache in our backs that never really went away. The kind of talk you use to keep the night from getting too heavy. We stopped by the usual gas station off Route 17, the one where the clerk always nodded without saying a word. I remember the smell of the place, like old oil and sugar. The radio kept feeding us the usual noise. Dispatch codes for chest pain, shortness of breath, routine transfers. We'd already responded to a call from an elderly man who'd fallen trying to reach his medication. Nothing unusual, nothing to make your pulse rise. We cleaned the stretcher, reset the monitors, and leaned back in our seats as the heater hummed against the chill that crept in through the doors. Nights like this made me forget how fast things can turn. I watched raindrops crawl down the window, tiny rivers sliding into each other. The sound filled the cab, steady and slow. My eyelids grew heavy, that half-dreaming state that comes just before another call breaks the peace. Ellis laughed about something, I don't even remember what. The laugh echoed too long in the empty street. Then the radio hissed, just a faint burst of static, and fell silent again. We looked at each other, waiting for the dispatcher's voice to come through. Nothing did. Just the soft, wet tapping of rain and the blinking of the dash clock turning over another hour. I turned the volume knob slightly, trying to catch whatever message we'd missed. But the channel stayed quiet. Too quiet. That was when I felt it, the shift in the air. Like the night had started listening back. The next call came in just after 1:30. The radio came alive with a burst of static, sharp enough to make Ellis flinch. For a moment, it was only noise, like someone breathing too close to the mic. Then the dispatcher's voice cut through, thin, uneven, almost distant. Unit 4-1, respond to unresponsive female location. The rest cracked and vanished. We waited for the repeat. Silence. Then the signal came back, clearer this time but laced with faint distortion. Old Willow Lane. Number 39. The voice didn't sound like the same dispatcher we'd been hearing all week. It was slower, flatter, like someone reading from memory instead of a screen. Ellis frowned at the console. That place still on the grid? I checked our system. The address was there but flagged inactive. No resident listed, no emergency history. The lot was marked for demolition, but the data hadn't been purged yet. We'd both heard stories about prank calls or kids messing with abandoned addresses. I told myself it was one of those. We radioed back for confirmation, but the line cracked mid-sentence again. A faint click followed, like someone hanging up an old receiver. I tried the backup frequency, nothing. Just faint static that rose and fell like breathing. Could be a tech glitch, Ellis muttered, starting the engine. We'll check it out quick. He said it casually, but I could tell he felt it too. That subtle pressure sitting behind the ribs. The kind you can't name but can't ignore. As we pulled onto the road, the rain thickened, drumming harder against the glass. The wipers fought to keep up, squealing across the windshield. The GPS lagged, blinking, recalibrating every few seconds. Street signs blurred in the mist. The air inside the cab grew colder, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I kept glancing at the clock. 1:47 a.m. It stayed there longer than it should have. By the time the coordinates finally stabilized, the radio clicked once more. The same faint voice whispered, barely audible through the static. "Don't be late." Ellis didn't hear it, but I did. The road to Old Willow Lane felt longer than it should have been. The map showed a straight stretch, but every turn looked the same. Dark trees bending inward, headlights flashing over soaked bark. The same faded road signs half swallowed by ivy. Ellis kept tapping the wheel, eyes narrowed, squinting through the rain. The signal bars on the radio had dropped to 0. Even the GPS stopped updating, frozen mid-route with our ambulance stuck in place like it refused to move closer. When the trees finally opened up, we saw it. A house standing alone at the end of the lane, wrapped in fog that clung to the ground like smoke. 2 stories. Boards nailed across the windows, front steps warped and sinking. The porch light was out, but the door was half open, swaying slightly in the wind. No movement, no lights inside, no sign of anyone waiting for help. Ellis left the engine running while I grabbed the kit. The air hit me first, cold and thick, carrying the scent of wet wood and something faintly metallic like old blood or rust. The rain slowed to a mist, as if even the weather held its breath here. We called out for the patient, voices echoing into the open doorway. No response. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through dust and broken glass scattered across the floorboards. There were footprints, faint and muddied, leading down a narrow hall that disappeared into darkness. "Maybe squatters," Ellis whispered, his voice barely carried. A soft sound came from inside. Slow, uneven breathing, the kind you hear from someone barely conscious. We froze, listening. It wasn't close. It came from deeper in the house, behind a half-closed door at the end of the hallway. We moved toward it step by step, the floor creaking under our boots. The sound grew clearer, steadier. Then it stopped completely. Ellis reached for the door handle, hesitated, then looked back at me. His face said everything mine couldn't. I nodded. The door opened with a long, tired groan, and what we saw inside made the air leave my lungs. She was lying on the floor just beyond the doorway, half curled like she'd collapsed mid-step. A thin beam of my flashlight washed over her, bare feet, damp clothes, one arm twisted beneath her. Her skin had that waxy pallor I'd only seen on people who'd been down too long. For a second, I thought we were too late. Then her chest moved, a shallow, uneven rise that made both of us jump back into motion. I knelt beside her and called out, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just the faint whistle of air in her throat. I checked her pulse, weak but there. Her skin was cold, not just from the weather, cold from the inside. Ellis opened the bag, prepping the oxygen mask. I tilted her chin, trying to get a better airway, when her eyes flicked open. They locked on mine instantly. No confusion, no panic, just that flat kind of awareness that doesn't belong to the living or the dying. Her lips moved before any sound came out. "Don't leave me here." Her voice was a whisper, cracked and raw, but those words hit like a weight. I asked what happened, but she only repeated it, slowly, painfully clear. "Don't leave me here." Ellis glanced down the hall, uneasy. "We're not leaving," he said, though his tone betrayed doubt. We lifted her onto the stretcher. The house moaned with every step we took, each board flexing under our boots. As we passed through the doorway, I noticed something strange. Her eyes were open again, staring past me toward the dark corner of the room. I turned my head, following her gaze. Nothing there, just peeling wallpaper and the faint sound of dripping water. Still, a chill crawled through my spine. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. The world felt quieter than before, like the night was holding its breath again. We loaded her into the ambulance, the sound of the door shutting echoing louder than it should have. Ellis climbed behind the wheel. I stayed with her in the back, adjusting her mask. She blinked once, eyes half-lidded, and whispered something I couldn't make out. But I swear it sounded like a name. The drive started quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's watching you. The patient's breathing came in faint, steady waves beneath the hum of the tires. I kept checking her vitals, numbers flickering, then stabilizing, then flickering again. Nothing stayed consistent. Every few seconds, the monitor gave a short, broken beep like it was catching its breath. Ellis kept his eyes on the road, but I could see tension in his shoulders. The rain had stopped, yet the windshield wipers dragged back and forth as if they didn't know it was over. I leaned closer to the patient. Her pulse was still there, faint but traceable. I told myself everything was fine, that old equipment acted up all the time. But the air in the back of that rig felt wrong, too cold, too still. Then the radio hissed just once. A static pulse, soft but sharp enough to make me look up. It didn't come from dispatch. It came from the speaker near her head, the same one that transmitted patient monitor data. The sound was low, rhythmic, almost like breathing through static. I unplugged the line and the noise stopped immediately. Ellis glanced in the mirror. "Everything good back there?" "Yeah," I lied, eyes still fixed on the monitor. Her heart rate began to climb, 70, 80, 100. I checked her again. She was completely still. No movement, no strain. Just that cold skin and half-open eyes. I reached for her wrist, and that's when she exhaled, long and soft. The way someone might sigh after a nightmare. I leaned in closer, thinking she was trying to speak. Her lips barely moved, and then I heard it. My name, not a groan, not confusion. She said it clearly, as if she'd known it all along. The sound froze me. Ellis hit a bump and the stretcher shifted, breaking my trance. I stared at her, heart racing, but her eyes were closed again, lashes wet with condensation. The monitor steadied. The radio went silent. For a few miles, nothing happened at all. But I could feel her name, my name, still hanging in the air, like the ambulance itself had heard it too. We were 10 minutes from the hospital when everything went wrong. 1 second, the monitor was steady. The next, it spiked into chaos. Alarms blared, numbers jumped, and then every light on the screen froze. I called out to Ellis, but before he could answer, the siren outside cut off mid-tone. The ambulance jerked as he slammed the brakes, tires skidding against wet asphalt. "What the hell was that?" he shouted, checking the dash. I didn't answer. I was staring at her. The patient's body had gone rigid. Her chest wasn't moving, but her eyes were wide open, glassy, and fixed straight ahead. I leaned in to check for a pulse, and she sat up. The straps pulled tight against her shoulders as her body strained against them, no sound coming from her throat. I shouted her name, but she didn't react. She just stared toward the front window, lips barely parting as she mouthed the same 2 words over and over. "He's here." Ellis spun in his seat. What did she say? Before I could answer, the interior lights flickered off. The only glow came from the weak red emergency switch near the door. In that dim light, everything looked distorted. The edges of the stretcher, the curve of her face, the reflection in the rear window. There was movement behind me. I felt it before I turned, a weight in the air pressing against my spine. The temperature dropped hard enough to fog my breath. For a moment, the red light blinked out completely, and in that pitch-black instant, I saw something standing where the light had been. Not a shape I could describe, just a presence. Close enough to feel its breath if it had one. Then the lights came back on. The stretcher was empty. The straps lay open, unbuckled, as if no one had ever been there. The oxygen mask still hissed, its plastic tubing twitching slightly from air pressure. I froze, unable to speak. Ellis called my name again, voice trembling now. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, the monitor printed one last thin strip of paper, a single line across the page, flat, still, and beneath it, written faintly in dark ink, 4:17 a.m. When we reached the hospital, the sky was beginning to pale, the first light of morning creeping up behind the buildings. Neither of us spoke during the drive. Ellis kept both hands locked on the wheel, eyes fixed dead ahead, as if looking away for even a second might invite something back inside. The siren stayed off. No need for it now. The air in the cab felt heavy, still carrying the echo of what had happened, or whatever we thought had happened. As soon as we pulled into the bay, I jumped out and opened the back doors. The stretcher was there, empty. The sheets creased and damp, oxygen mask on the floor, strap buckles lying open like we'd left in a hurry. I told myself she must have gotten up somehow. Maybe she'd walked out when the lights flickered. Maybe I'd imagined the rest. Inside, the triage nurse looked confused when we rolled in with no patient. "You said you had a live female, mid-30s?" she asked. "Yeah," Ellis said quietly, eyes low. "We did. We checked the logs. Nothing matched. No patient entry. No radio record of our call. Even the dispatch report for the night showed our unit as available. No outgoing runs listed after 1:30 a.m. I asked the dispatcher directly, and she frowned like she thought I was joking. "We never sent you to Old Willow Lane," she said. "That street's been off the system for years." I went back to the rig later to clear my head. The air smelled of ozone and cold metal. On the floor near the stretcher, I found the ECG paper still spooling out of the machine. It stretched almost to the door, lines running perfectly flat. I followed it with my eyes to the very end. The last inch of tape was darker. Ink burned into the paper. 3 words. "Don't come back." I tore it off and threw it in the waste bin. But that didn't matter. I can still see those words when I close my eyes. They weren't a warning. They felt like a promise. And the worst part, Ellis never asked what I saw when the lights went out. He didn't have to. A few days passed before I could even bring myself to look into it. The hospital treated it like a glitch. The dispatch logs, the ECG data, the empty report, they said it was a system malfunction, maybe human error. But I knew better. Something about that night stayed beneath my skin, quiet but constant, like a heartbeat you start to feel in your teeth. I took my day off and drove back toward Old Willow Lane. The turnoff was easy to miss, hidden behind a new construction site and a fence covered in warning signs. The road itself was gone, swallowed by weeds and mud. I parked near where the lane should have started and walked the rest of the way on foot. All that remained was an empty field, uneven and quiet. The house wasn't there, not even a trace of foundation. Just a few scattered boards half buried in dirt. I checked the property record on my phone, demolished in 2016 after a fire. Cause undetermined. A woman found inside, deceased on arrival. The timestamp on the incident report? 4:17 a.m. I stared at that number until the screen dimmed. My chest went tight, and for a moment I could almost hear the beeping again. The same tone from the ambulance monitor, slow, steady, then gone. Later that night I called Ellis. He didn't answer. Instead, he sent a short message. "Don't ask about that call again." The next morning I heard he'd put in for transfer, moved 2 states away. That's when I checked the radio archive myself. A friend at dispatch let me listen in on the night's recordings. Line by line, every unit reported normally, except one file, our time slot. It was there but silent. No static, no voice, no background. Just a single click at the start and a faint whisper at the end. It wasn't words, more like breathing, slow and uneven, just like hers. I closed the file and shut down the terminal. Whatever happened on that road didn't end when we left. It just changed places, and somehow it still knew how to find me. It's been months since that night, but I still can't sleep through a full one. Some nights I wake up to the sound of rain and think I'm back in that ambulance. The low hum of the engine, the faint chemical smell, the chill pressing through my gloves. I reach for the radio without realizing it, half expecting to hear her voice breaking through the static. Work feels different now. Every call, no matter how routine, carries that shadow of doubt. When the radio clicks before a dispatch, my chest tightens. I listen for anything unusual in the tone, the words, the breathing behind the voice. Once I even thought I heard it again, a whisper almost too faint to notice, saying something I didn't want to believe. My name. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that all of it, what I saw, what I heard, was exhaustion playing tricks on a tired mind. But deep down, I know what I felt wasn't imagined. You don't forget that kind of cold. You don't forget the way silence can feel alive. The call never showed up on record. The house never existed past 2016. The woman we picked up never had a name, yet I remember every detail of her face, every second of her breathing, every flicker of the monitor printing that one-time code. 4:17 a.m. Sometimes when I'm driving home and the sirens of another unit pass in the distance, I feel that same pressure in my chest, the weight of something unfinished, like that night hasn't ended, only paused. I've stopped trying to explain it. Some things don't need understanding, they just happen and you carry them until you can't anymore. But there's one thing I know for sure. Whatever called us to that place wasn't asking for help. It wanted to be found. And sometimes when the city goes quiet and the radio hums low in the dark, I can almost hear the faintest echo of her voice again. Soft, pleading, and far too close. Don't leave me here. That's when I turn off the radio, because every time I hear a siren at night, I swear I see that same road again.